Hello and welcome to another episode of A Brief History. Today's episode, Spyro. Ready, set, go.
California, 1994. Fledgling video game designer Ted Price founds a new development studio called Extreme Software, which would eventually be known by a name that didn't quite reek so much of the 90s, Insomniac Games. Price is later joined by brothers Alex and Brian Hastings, and the trio began work on their first game, a Doom clone called Disruptor, released for the PlayStation in 1997. However, despite mountains of critical praise, Disruptor was a commercial failure and threatened to sink Insomniac into bankruptcy.
Enter Mark Cerny, an executive at Universal Interactive Studios who, after looking at the demographics of most PS1 owners, recommended that Insomniac make their next game more family-friendly.
Oh my god, Morty, what did you do? You killed the Simpsons, Morty!
No, I didn't mean to!
God, look at the baby one! Oh my god, Morty!
And thus, Insomniac began developing a new mascot-driven 3D platform game, hoping to give the PlayStation another face to rival Nintendo's Super Mario.
Simultaneously, Alex Hastings developed a new panoramic 3D game engine that rendered different levels of detail depending on how far an object was away from the player, allowing this new title to feature incredible draw distances. It also meant that Insomniac was able to easily include mechanics like gliding and semi-open worlds with ease, incorporating all of these elements into a new IP, Spyro the Dragon, released in September of 1998.
Spyro the Dragon followed the adventures of a young purple dragon who must free his imprisoned brethren from a curse placed by Nasty Nork and his hordes of soldiers. And this was done by venturing to a wide variety of worlds, freeing the trapped dragons, and collecting everything in sight because it's the 90s.
Oh my god, Morty, it's the 90s, Morty. You gotta run around and collect stuff, Morty. It's just what you do. You're gonna have to. You gotta collect these gems and just jam them way up your butt, Morty. I just needed to jam them way up your butt.
The title was very well received by critics who praised its graphics, story, and score by former Police drummer Stuart Copeland.
Are you safe, Mr. Tango? Mr. Tango, are you safe?
Despite slow sales during its launch window, Spyro the Dragon would become one of the best-selling games on the PlayStation 1, topping out at around 4.8 million units sold.
In fact, Spyro did so well that Sony Computer Entertainment wanted a sequel to the game ready for release by the holiday season of 1999, leaving Insomniac with a development timeline of less than a year. But despite this enormous amount of pressure, Ted Price and the other developers at Insomniac took it in stride, seeing it as a challenge to revolutionize their series in a short amount of time. And they did so by including various mini-games and expanding the game's narrative and cinematics.
This time around, Spyro travels to the distant kingdom of Avalar to free it from the rule of the tyrannous dragon-hating Ripto in Spyro 2: Ripto's Rage, released on November 2nd, 1999. Now, despite the horribly rushed development, Spyro 2 was just about as big of a hit as its predecessor, with critics praising its more complex story and the variety in its gameplay. And just like the game that came before it, Spyro 2 sold incredibly well, eventually moving 3.4 million copies worldwide.
And the fact that Insomniac made an even better game in less than a year isn't even the craziest part of this. Oh no, that honor belongs to the fact that Sony and Universal wanted Insomniac to do it again. Immediately after the release of Ripto's Rage, Insomniac began development on a third Spyro game, completing it in just 10.5 months.
This game, known as Spyro Year of the Dragon, was released on October 20th. This game, known as Spyro Year of the Dragon, was released on October 25th, 2000, and is often considered the best of the 3 original Spyro games because of its detailed graphics, top-notch level design, charming storyline, another great Stuart Copeland soundtrack, and a host of new playable characters. That's right, Year of the Dragon included 4 new characters that the player was able to take control of, including Sheila the Kangaroo, a flying penguin named Sergeant Bird, the Yeti Bentley, and a space monkey called Agent 9, who, in retrospect, kinda seems like a blueprint of something Insomniac may have tried later on in their history. Each of these characters brought something different to the table and added totally new methods of gameplay to the franchise.
So by this point, with 3 excellent games released in just 3 years, it seemed as if Insomniac could do no wrong. And as gaming inched closer to its next generation of consoles, the entire world was excited to see what they did next with Spyro the Dragon. And they shocked everyone by doing nothing. Yeah. While creating Year of the Dragon, Insomniac truly felt like they were scraping the bottom of the barrel to come up with new ideas for their little purple dragon, and decided that it was best to move on to a new IP rather than struggle with Spyro and potentially create a lackluster game.
And while Insomniac's future laid elsewhere among the stars, Universal kept the rights to Spyro and decided to keep the franchise alive by giving it to other developers. The first of which being both Check 6 Games and Equinox Digital Entertainment, who eventually churned out what was known as Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. Released for the PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube on November 3rd, 2002, Enter the Dragonfly was the first Spyro game that received fairly poor reviews, and unfortunately, it would not be the last. Critics disapproved of Enter the Dragonfly's numerous bugs and glitches, frame rate issues, and lack of innovation, stating that it was basically just more of the same gameplay seen in the PS1 titles, but with updated graphics. But this was just one kind of meh game. That doesn't mean the series is doomed, right?
Well, despite the best hopes of Spyro fans, the future wasn't very bright for the series, as evidenced by the release of Spyro: A Hero's Tale for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube GameCube on November 2nd, 2004. Developed by Eurocom and Traveler's Tale. Yes, the same guys who made The Legend of Legends, Sonic 3D Blast, I didn't write this. A Hero's Tale was yet another mediocre entry in the series, with reviews praising its increased production value but criticizing its lack of innovation and disruptive minigames. Things that only about 5 years ago, Spyro 2 had been praised for, but by 2004 were simply becoming antiquated.
However, while Spyro was kinda beginning to falter in the home console world, he was faring a bit better in the handheld market. Between 2001 and 2003, Spyro saw 3 isometric platforming games for the Game Boy Advance known as Season of Ice, Season of Flame, and Attack of the Rhinox respectively, all of which were received moderately well. But that streak didn't last for long, for in 2004, Spyro Orange: The Cortex Conspiracy, a minigame compilation crossover with Crash Bandicoot, was released to very poor reviews.
A change was clearly needed for the Spyro series, but fortunately, Universal knew exactly what to do. And what was that? Make an RPG for the Nintendo DS, of course? Yeah, I wish I was making that up, but 2005's Spyro Shadow Legacy does indeed exist. I mean, I guess if they can get BioWare to make a freaking Sonic RPG, then anything's possible. What with its fantastic music.
But in all seriousness, after this string of less than perfect games, Universal did try to dramatically retool the Spyro franchise by turning to developer Chrome Studios to reboot its story, rework its gameplay, and even recast many of its characters. The result of their work was the Legend of Spyro trilogy, the first installment of which, A New Beginning, was released on October 10th, 2006. A New Beginning was just that for the Spyro series, with reviews praising its darker storyline, more action-based gameplay, and all-star cast that included actors like Elijah Wood and Gary Oldman. Yes, that Elijah Wood and Gary Oldman from those movies I haven't seen. However, even though it was better than other recent installments in the series, A New Beginning was still considered nowhere near as good as Insomniac's original trio of titles.
And again, things only went downhill from here. Both of the subsequent releases in the Legend of Spyro series, 2007's The Eternal Night and 2008's Dawn of the Dragon, wouldn't live up to the expectations put upon them, leaving Spyro fans disappointed yet again. And unfortunately, Dawn of the Dragon was the last mainline Spyro game to have been released thus far. That's not to say that Spyro is a dead franchise, however. A spin-off series known as Skylanders remains one of the most popular toys-to-life franchises in the world, but it has very much taken on a life of its own. If we're looking at just action-driven character platformers, Spyro the Dragon has been dormant for almost a decade now, and nothing new yet lies on the horizon.
The Spyro series is one of the sadder stories of gaming history. What started out as one of the most beloved and promising new IPs of the late 90s went sour almost overnight, and try as they might, no one could really figure out what to do with the series after that, eventually leading to the franchise just disappearing into its own spin-off, no less.
But while the future of the Spyro series is uncertain, to say the least, that doesn't change the fact that the original PlayStation 1 trilogy was one of the most successful platforming franchises to emerge from the late 90s, and the influence of these 3 games was visible in almost every 3D platforming game that came afterwards. And with new 3D platformers like Yooka-Laylee gaining large amounts of support on Kickstarter, and Sony announcing HD remakes of all the original Crash Bandicoot games, it is becoming increasingly likely that we're on the cusp of a 90s 3D platformer resurgence. And if that is the case, Spyro may not be as far gone as we once thought. Thanks for watching, guys. DFTBA. Hey guys, Austin here. Thank you for watching, and also thanks to Ryder and the Game Theory team for having me on board for this. It was a lot of fun, and no, I did not dye this purple for Spyro. So Ryder and I are working on our own video, but it's not quite ready yet. So in the meantime, if you'd like, you can hop over to my channel, Arcadia, and check out a video that I made called Sonic Clones, where I'm gonna talk about games that are what I consider to be clones of Sonic. If not, that's fine. Thanks for watching, I love you, bye-bye.